Billion-dollar betrayal. The island that revealed a tech mogul's dark secret. The bullet shattered the passenger window of Daniel Cross's Tesla Model S, missing his head by inches. Glass exploded across the leather interior as he instinctively ducked his hands, jerking the wheel hard to the right. Jesus Christ. Daniel's voice cracked as adrenaline flooded his system. The car veered into oncoming traffic on the Bay Bridge, horns blaring as vehicles swerved to avoid collision. Another shot. This one punched through the rear windshield, spiderwebbing the safety glass. Daniel could see the muzzle flash in his side mirror, a black motorcycle rider in full gear professionally maintaining distance while taking aim. Who the hell wanted him dead? Daniel had built Cross Dynamics into a $12 billion AI empire, sure. But he'd always been careful to avoid the kind of enemies who settled disputes with bullets. His competitors fought with patents and hostile takeovers, not assassination attempts. The motorcycle accelerated, closing the gap. Daniel floored the accelerator, but the Tesla's silent electric motor felt inadequate against the raw violence pursuing him. The speedometer climbed past 90 as they approached the Bay Bridge's apex. A third shot took out his driver's spotted mirror. Professional work, the shooter was hurting him, not trying for a kill shot yet. They wanted something first. Daniel's phone buzzed on the center console. Unknown number. Against every instinct, he answered. "Hello, Danny." The voice was electronically distorted, unrecognizable. "Long time no see." "Who is this? What do you want?" "What I want is for you to remember. Remember what you stole. Remember who you killed." The words hit Daniel like a physical blow. His hands trembled on the steering wheel as memories he'd spent 18 years suppressing clawed at the edges of his consciousness. Joseph Redbird, brilliant, trusting Joseph with his revolutionary AI algorithms and his unshakable belief in technology's power to preserve indigenous culture. Joseph, who'd trusted Daniel with his life's work, only to watch his best friend steal everything and claim it as his own creation. Joseph, who'd walked off the Golden Gate Bridge on a rainy October morning 18 years ago. "Joseph's been dead for 18 years, Daniel managed. "Has he?" The voice carried cold amusement. "Or have you just been telling yourself that to sleep at night?" The motorcycle was right beside him, now rider raising a pistol, not for a kill shot, for the tires. At this speed on this bridge, a blowout would send the Tesla through the guardrail and into San Francisco Bay. Daniel had maybe 3 seconds to make a choice. He chose chaos. Yanking the wheel hard left, he rammed the Tesla into the motorcycle. Metal screamed against metal as both vehicles careened toward the bridge's edge. The rider fought for control, but physics was unforgiving at 90 miles per hour. The motorcycle hit the guardrail, first launching its rider in a graceful arc over the side. Daniel caught a glimpse of the figure tumbling toward the churning water below. Black helmet, nondescript gear, no identifying features. But the Tesla's momentum carried it forward, the damaged guardrail giving way like tissue paper. For a terrifying moment, Daniel found himself airborne, the vast expanse of San Francisco Bay stretching below him like a gray shroud. He had just enough time to think, "This is how it ends. This is how I pay." Then the world exploded into darkness and churning water. Damn. Consciousness returned in fragments. Cold. Salt. Pain radiating from what felt like every cell in his body. Daniel tried to open his eyes, but the effort sent lightning through his skull. "Easy," a woman's voice surprisingly gentle. "Don't try to move yet." Daniel forced his eyes open despite the pain. He was lying on sand, rough and warm against his cheek. Above him, a woman knelt in the late afternoon light, her long black hair creating a curtain around her face. She was beautiful in a way that seemed to belong to this wild place. Sharp cheekbones, dark-skinned eyes that held depths he couldn't fathom. Maybe 35, maybe 40. Age seemed irrelevant, and when looking at her, like trying to guess the age of a mountain. "Where?" His voice came out as a croak. "Alcatraz Island. Well, what used to be Alcatraz." She held a water bottle to his lips. "The Cherokee Nation has maintained it as a sacred sanctuary since 2020. You washed up on our beach about 6 hours ago." Daniel struggled to sit up, his head swimming with the effort. Around him, he could see the familiar silhouette of San Francisco's skyline, but it looked wrong, somehow too distant, too small. "My car." There was a motorcycle. "Someone was shooting." "I know." The woman's voice carried a strange weight. I know exactly what happened to you, Daniel Cross. The use of his name sent a chill through him that had nothing to do with his wet clothes. How do you know my name? She studied his face for a long moment as if making some internal decision. Because I've been waiting for you to define your way here for 18 years. I don't understand. My name is Elena Redbird. She paused, watching for his reaction. Joseph Redbird was my brother. The name hit Daniel like a physical blow. Memories came flooding back, not the sanitized version he'd convinced himself was true, but the raw, ugly reality. Joseph's face the last time they'd spoken, full of betrayal and heartbreak. The way Joseph's voice had broken when he'd said, I trusted you, Danny. I loved you like a brother. Joseph's dead, Daniel whispered. Yes. Elena's voice was steady, but he caught the pain underneath. My brother died 18 years ago, and you killed him. Daniel expected in anger, expected her to call for help, expected anything except the strange calm in her voice. If you know who I am, why did you save me? Elena stood brushing sand from her jeans. Because I have something to show you. Someone you need to meet. She led him up from the beach toward what had once been the prison complex. The island had been completely transformed, the harsh concrete structures softened with native plants, solar panels gleaming on rebuilt roofs, gardens where the exercise yard used to be. The government transferred custody to the Cherokee Nation 5 years ago, Lena explained as they walked. We've turned it into a center for preserving indigenous culture and technology. Joseph would have loved it. Daniel's legs felt shaky, but he forced himself to keep walking. Every step brought back more memories, each one a fresh wound. Joseph's excitement when he'd first explained his spirit AI concept, the way his face had lit up when Daniel had agreed to help him develop it, the gradual way Daniel had shifted the project, making subtle changes, filing patents under his own name, convincing Joseph it was all for the good of the work. Why? Elena asked suddenly. Why did you steal from him? The question he'd spent 18 years avoiding. I don't know. Greed, I suppose. Ambition. I saw what his algorithms could do, saw the potential for profit, and Daniel's voice failed him. You convinced yourself you deserved it more than he did. Yes. They'd reached the main building now, a low structure that hummed with quiet technology. Through the windows, Daniel could see workstations, server screens displaying code that looked remarkably familiar. Joseph's work didn't die with him, Elena said. I've been continuing it, trying to build what he envisioned AI that preserves culture instead of consuming it, that connects communities instead of isolating them. Why are you showing me this? Elena paused at the entrance, her hand on the door. Because I need your help. Daniel stared at her. You need my help. I destroyed your brother's life. I drove him to suicide. And you want my help? I want your expertise. Joseph's son needs something only you can provide. Joseph had a son. He called Michael. He's 17 now. Elena's voice softened. He's been living with severe autism since Joseph died. He doesn't speak, barely acknowledges the outside world. But he has his father's gift for understanding AI systems. She opened the door, revealing a spacious room filled with cutting-edge technology. And there, hunched over a computer terminal in the corner, was a teenager who looked exactly like Joseph had at that age, the same dark hair, the same intense focus, the same aura of brilliant isolation. Michael, Elena called softly, we have a visitor. The boy didn't look up from his screen, but Daniel could see what he was working on. Lines of code that were impossibly elegant algorithms that seemed to dance with organic intelligence. It was Joseph's work, but evolved, refined, made somehow more beautiful. He's been trying to complete his father's original vision, Elena explained, a true AI companion for indigenous communities. But he's missing something, and I think you know what. Daniel approached the workstation slowly. On the screen, he could see the familiar structure of the Spirit AI framework, the same code he'd stolen and corrupted into Cross Dynamics' current products. But this version was different, cleaner, more alive. The emotional core, Daniel whispered. Joseph always said the AI needed to understand not just language, but feeling, context, cultural significance. Michael's fingers stilled on the keyboard for just a moment, the first sign he'd acknowledged their presence. You stripped that out, Elena said. When you stole Joseph's work, you removed everything that made it special, everything that could have helped people connect with their heritage. You turned his dream into a profit machine. Daniel sank into a chair, the weight of 18 years of guilt crushing down on him. I know, God help me, I know what I did. Michael can build the technical framework, but he can't understand the emotional component. He's never experienced it himself. Elena's voice was carefully controlled. You're the only person alive who understands both what Joseph was trying to create and how human emotion translates into code. You want me to help you finish what I destroyed. I want you to help me save my nephew. Elena looked at Michael, who was now typing with renewed intensity. He's been locked in his own world since his father died. The only time he comes alive is when he's working on this project. If we can complete it, if we can create the AI companion Joseph envisioned, maybe Michael can finally connect with the world. Daniel studied the boy's profile, seeing so much of Joseph in the set of his shoulders, the way he attacked complex problems. What makes you think I'd help? What makes you think I'm even capable of redemption after what I've done? Elena was quiet for a long moment, because 18 years ago, when my brother called me the night before he died, he didn't talk about revenge. He talked about forgiveness. He said you were lost, not evil, confused, not malicious. He still believed there was good in you even after everything. The words hit Daniel harder than the car crash had. Joseph had forgiven him even in his darkest hour, had seen past the betrayal to whatever humanity remained. I don't deserve that kind of grace, Daniel said. No, Elena agreed. You don't, but Michael deserves a chance at a normal life. And maybe if you help us, you can finally stop running from what you've done. Michael suddenly looked up from his screen, the first time he'd made eye contact since Daniel arrived. For just a moment, his eyes were exactly like Joseph's brilliant searching, full of possibility. Then he returned to his work, but Daniel caught sight of what was on the screen. A single line of code, elegant in its simplicity, while guilt was true. Seek redemption. A loop that would run forever unless broken by external action. Daniel realized that Elena wasn't just asking for his help with the AI project. She was offering him something he'd thought lost forever, the chance to make amends. To take the poison he'd created from Joseph's pure vision and somehow transmute it back into something healing. All right, he said quietly, I'll help, but I need you to understand something first. What? The person who tried to kill me today, they know about Joseph? They know what I did. If I stay here, I might be putting you and Michael in danger. Elena's expression didn't change. Let me worry about that. This island has protections you don't understand. What kind of protections? The kind that have kept us safe for 5 years while we've been developing technology that certain people would kill to possess. Elena moved to a window overlooking the bay. Did you really think your car accident was random? That someone just happened to try to assassinate you on the same day you were scheduled to drive past the only place in the Bay Area where Joseph's sister lives? Daniel felt cold spreading through his chest. You're saying it was planned, that someone wanted me to end up here. I'm saying that sometimes the universe has a way of forcing people to confront their sins. Elena turned back to him. And sometimes it takes a bullet to make someone change direction. Before Daniel could respond, his phone, somehow still functional despite its underwater adventure, buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Nice try, Danny, but you can't hide from family forever. See you soon, Rar. Daniel's blood turned to ice as he realized who had tried to kill him. Robert, his younger brother Robert, who'd always lived in Daniel's shadow, who'd always resented his success, who knew every detail about the Joseph Redbird situation because Daniel had confessed it to him years ago in a moment of guilt-ridden weakness. Elena, Daniel said quietly, we need to talk. Elena led Daniel to a smaller room that served as her private office. The walls were covered with photographs, family gatherings, traditional ceremonies, and prominently displayed in the center, a picture of Joseph holding a baby. That's Michael when he was 6 months old, Elena said, noticing Daniel's gaze. Joseph was so proud. He said his son would grow up in a world where technology served humanity instead of enslaving it. Daniel studied the photo, something nagging at him. The baby's features, the way Joseph held him. Elena, who is Michael's mother. She turned away, busying herself with making tea from herbs she kept in small jars. That's Complicated. The text I just received, it's from my brother Robert. He's the one who tried to kill me today. Daniel showed her the phone. But how did he know I'd end up here? How did he know about you? Elena's hands stilled on the tea preparation. Sit down, Daniel. There are things I need to tell you. The gravity in her voice made his stomach clench. He sat in a worn leather chair that smelled of sage and cedar. 18 years ago, Joseph wasn't the only one you betrayed. Elena's voice was barely above a whisper. Do you remember the night before the Spirit AI presentation? The night before you were supposed to present Joseph's work to the investors as partners? Daniel's memory stirred. That night was mostly a blur of alcohol and anxiety, but fragments remained. A hotel bar, too many drinks, a woman with dark hair and kind eyes who'd listened to his fears about the presentation. You, he breathed. That was you in the hotel bar. I was in San Francisco visiting Joseph for his big day. I was so proud of him, so excited about what you two were building together. Elena's hands trembled slightly as she poured hot water over the herbs. You were terrified, rambling about investor pressure, about how Joseph's vision was too pure for the real world. More memories surfaced, each one a fresh wound. Elena listening patiently as he'd explained his plan to adjust the presentation to make the AI more commercially viable. Elena arguing gently that Joseph's vision was what made the project special. Elena, we slept together. Daniel said the words tasting like ash. Yes. Elena set a cup of tea in front of him. And the next morning you presented Joseph's work as your own creation. You destroyed my brother's dreams, stole his life's work, and broke his heart. All within 12 hours of making love to his sister. The cup slipped from Daniel's numb fingers, shattering on the floor. Michael is your son. Elena's voice was steady now, matter of fact. Joseph never knew. I never told him because I couldn't bear to add that betrayal to everything else you'd done to him. Daniel felt like the world was tilting beneath him. But Michael's autism, his behavior, isn't autism. Elena knelt to clean up the broken cup. Michael is brilliant, possibly more brilliant than his father. But when Joseph died, when the news reports talked about how Joseph Redbird had inspired the breakthrough that made Daniel Cross rich, Michael understood. He was old enough to know that the man who destroyed his father was also his biological father. He's been pretending for 18 years. It started as withdrawal grief for the father who raised him. But as he got older, as he learned more about what really happened, the silence became protection. If the world thought he was disabled, they wouldn't see him as a threat, wouldn't realize he was continuing Joseph's work. Daniel's mind reeled. You've both been lying to me. We've been protecting ourselves. Elena stood, her movements sharp with barely controlled emotion. Do you have any idea what it's been like watching you build an empire on my brother's grave while raising your son alone? Seeing your face on magazine cover, hearing you called a visionary, knowing that everything you achieved should have been Joseph's. Why didn't you come forward? Why didn't you expose me? Because exposure wouldn't bring Joseph back. Because a custody battle would have destroyed Michael. Because Elena's voice broke for the first time. Because despite everything, I loved you once, and I could see that the guilt was eating you alive. Before Daniel could respond, the sound of helicopter rotors filled the air. Through the window, they could see a black aircraft circling the island. That's not the Coast Guard, Elena said grimly. Daniel's phone buzzed again. This time it was a call from Robert. Answer it, Elena said, but put it on speaker. Daniel hesitated, then accepted the call. Hello, brother. Robert's voice carried the same cold amusement as the electronically distorted voice from the bridge. Enjoying your reunion. Robert, what do you want? What I've always wanted, Danny. What should have been mine from the beginning. The helicopter was landing now, kicking up sand and debris. You stole from Joseph Redbird, but you also stole from me. I was your partner in those early days, remember? I helped you build Cross Dynamics, helped you cover up the theft. And what did I get? A junior partnership while you took all the credit. You agreed to the arrangement because I was young and stupid and believed in family loyalty. Robert's voice cracked with years of resentment. But I've learned better. I've learned that in this world, you take what you can get. Through the window, Daniel could see armed figures emerging from the helicopter. military-grade equipment, professional movements. This wasn't a personal vendetta. This was a corporate takeover with lethal force. The board voted me interim CEO after your supposed death, Robert continued. Amazing how quickly they'll move when there's a body to bury. But then you had to survive, didn't you? Had to wash up on the very island where your sins come home to roost. Elena was moving quickly around the room, gathering items from what Daniel now realized were strategic hiding places. A pistol from behind a book, emergency communication equipment from a concealed compartment. You've been planning this, Daniel said into the phone, for years. Ever since you told me about Joseph Redbird during one of your guilt-ridden confessions. Did you really think I wouldn't investigate? Wouldn't discover that Joseph had a sister in Sauron? Wouldn't realize the potential value of their continued work? Elena had activated some kind of alarm system. Red lights were flashing silently throughout the building, and Daniel could hear the distant sound of emergency protocols engaging. Here's how this is going to work, Robert continued. You're going to sign over your remaining shares in Cross Dynamics to me. In exchange, I won't kill Elena and Michael. You get to live with the knowledge that you've failed everyone you've ever cared about, and I get to build the empire we should have built together. And if I refuse, then I take your shares anyway, and your new family joins Joseph in whatever comes after this life. The line went dead. Outside, the armed figures were advancing toward the building in tactical formation. We need to get to Michael, Elena said, slinging a pack over her shoulder. There's a safe room in the lower level. They ran through corridors that Daniel was just beginning to understand weren't what they seemed. This wasn't just a cultural center, it was a fortress. Hidden cameras, reinforced doors, escape routes that had been planned and rehearsed. They found Michael in the computer room, still typing with seemingly oblivious concentration. But as they approached, Daniel realized the boy's screen showed something different now. Security feeds from around the island, tactical assessments of the incoming threat communication channels to what looked like military units. Michael, Elena said urgently, we need to go. The boy Daniel's son looked up and spoke for the first time since Daniel's arrival. No, Anton. His voice was calm, assured, completely unlike what Daniel had expected. We need to finish this. Daniel stared at his son, really looked at him for the first time. The resemblance to Joseph was superficial. The bone structure, the way he held his head, the intensity in his eyes, that was all Daniel. But refined, focused in a way Daniel had never managed. Uncle Robert is here. Michael continued, his fingers never stopping their work. He's been tracking Dad through corporate channels for months. The assassination attempt was just to flush you out, make you run somewhere predictable. How do you know about Robert? Michael smiled, the first genuine expression Daniel had seen from him. I've been inside Cross Dynamics Systems for 3 years. I know everything about the company, including Uncle Robert's plans to steal the AI patents and sell them to foreign interests. Elena looked stunned. Michael, you never told me. I needed to protect you, Mom, both of you. Michael's screen showed the tactical team breaching the main entrance. Uncle Robert doesn't just want the company, he wants Joseph's perfected AI algorithms, the ones I've been developing. You've been using me, Daniel realized. Both of you, the rescue, the story about needing my help, it was all to get me here so you could use me as bait. Initially, yes. Elena's voice carried shame but also resolve. But Daniel, what I told you about forgiveness, about Joseph's last words, that was all true. And then why the deception? Because, Michael said, standing from his workstation, we needed you to choose, really choose. We needed to know if you'd help us when you thought it would cost you everything, or if you'd run like you did 18 years ago. The sound of gunfire echoed through the building. Robert's team had encountered resistance, the protections Elena had mentioned. There are Cherokee Nation security forces on the island, Michael explained, reading Daniel's expression. This is sovereign territory. What Uncle Robert is doing constitutes an act of war. He won't care about legal niceties if he gets what he wants. That's why we need to give him what he deserves instead. Michael led them to what appeared to be a maintenance closet, but when he pressed his palm to a concealed scanner, it opened onto a high-tech command center. Banks of servers, multiple screens, showing everything from satellite feeds to financial markets. Joseph designed this place, Elena explained. He predicted that his work would eventually attract the wrong kind of attention. The entire island is a trap for people like Robert. Like me, you mean? No, Dad. Michael's use of the word hit Daniel like a physical blow. Not like you. You stole out of weakness and ambition. Uncle Robert kills out of greed and hatred. There's a difference, when I say. On the screens, Daniel could see Robert's team moving through the building, encountering increasingly sophisticated defensive measures. But they were also getting closer to the command center. We have maybe 10 minutes before they breach this room, Michael said. That's enough time to upload the complete Spirit AI system to every Cherokee Nation server in North America. What does that accomplish? It makes Joseph's vision immortal. It ensures that no corporation can ever again steal indigenous technological innovations. And it triggers a complete data dump of Cross Dynamics' illegal activities to the FBI. Daniel understood. You're not just protecting the AI, you're destroying my company. I'm destroying Robert's company, Michael corrected. The company you built was already dying from the poison of its origins. I'm just putting it out of its misery. Elena placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder. The question is, will you help us? Will you provide the authentication codes needed to complete the upload? Daniel looked at his son, this brilliant, damaged young man who'd spent his entire conscious life living in the shadow of Daniel's sins. Then at Elena, who'd sacrificed 18 years to protect both Joseph's legacy and Daniel's child. If I do this, I lose everything. My wealth, my position, probably my freedom. Yes, Michael said simply, but you'll finally stop losing your soul. The sound of cutting tools echoed from outside the command center. Robert's team had found them. Daniel moved to the primary terminal and began entering his CEO access codes. Tell me about the Spirit AI, the real version. What does it do? Michael's face lit up with the same passion Daniel remembered from Joseph. It learns cultural context. It understands that language isn't just words but history, emotion, identity. It can help preserve dying languages by understanding not just grammar, but the cultural significance of expressions, stories, ways of thinking. As Daniel worked, he could see the vision that had originally captivated him about Joseph's work. Not the profit potential, but the human potential. The chance to use technology to heal instead of exploit. Upload progress 40%, the computer announced. The cutting stopped outside. Robert's voice came through a speaker system he'd apparently hijacked. Daniel, I know you're in there. I'm going to count to 10 and then my team is coming in. If you've done anything to compromise Cross Dynamics, I'll start with the boy. Dad, Michael said quietly, whatever happens, I want you to know I understand why Mom never told Joseph about you. You weren't ready to be the father he needed. Am I ready now? We're about to find out. The blast door exploded inward in a shower of sparks and smoke. Robert strode through the breach, flanked by 6 armed operatives. He looked exactly like Daniel remembered, but harder, colder. Success hadn't been kind to him. Hello, brother, Robert said, raising a pistol. Step away from the terminal. Upload progress 65%, the computer announced cheerfully. You always were too sentimental, Danny. That's why I'm the one holding the gun, and you're the one about to lose everything. Daniel stood slowly, hands raised. It's already too late, Robert. The upload is automated now. Then I'll just have to make sure there's no one left to benefit from it. Robert turned the gun toward Michael, but Elena stepped between them. You want to kill children now? She asked. How far you've fallen, Robert Cross? The boy isn't a child, he's a weapon. His AI work is worth billions to the right buyers. Robert's eyes glittered with greed. Did you really think I didn't know about your little genius here? I've been monitoring his activities for months. Upload progress 80%. Shut it down, Michael, Robert commanded. Now. I can't, Michael said calmly. Only Dad can stop it now. Robert swung the gun back to Daniel. Buy it. Daniel looked at his son, then at Elena, then back at his brother. No. I'll kill them both. Then you'll never get the access codes for the military contracts, the ones worth $50 billion over the next decade. Daniel was lying, but he could see Robert calculating. Upload progress 90%. You're bluffing. Am I check Cross Dynamics classified project folder? The Pentagon's AI initiative. Without my biometric confirmation, that contract dies with me. Robert hesitated, and in that moment of uncertainty, Michael acted. The teenager moved with surprising speed, diving for a control panel Daniel hadn't noticed. Emergency lights began flashing as blast shutters sealed the room. Upload complete, the computer announced. Spirit AI activated across all Cherokee Nation networks. Robert screamed in rage and fired, but the bullet struck reinforced glass instead of flesh. The command center was now completely locked down. You've destroyed everything, Robert raged. No, Daniel said quietly. I've finally built something worth building. On the screens around them, they could see the results of Michael's work. Across dozens of tribal communities, the Spirit AI was coming online. Language preservation programs, cultural education systems, communication networks that respected and enhanced indigenous ways of life instead of replacing them. Joseph's dream finally realized, but Robert wasn't finished. You think this room will protect you forever? I have enough explosives to bring down this entire building. That would be unwise, a new voice said through the communication system. It was calm, authoritative, carrying the weight of absolute certainty. Abbot Maria Santos of the FBI appeared on one of the screens standing in what looked like Cross Dynamics' main conference room. Mr. Robert Cross, you're under arrest for attempted murder, corporate espionage, violation of tribal sovereignty, and approximately 47 other federal crimes that we've just finished cataloging, thanks to the data dump your nephew so helpfully provided. Robert's face went white. That's impossible. I covered my tracks. Your brother covered your tracks, Agent Santos corrected. Daniel Cross has been cooperating with our investigation for the past 6 months. Daniel stared at the screen in shock. What? Did you really think we wouldn't notice when someone started making inquiries about the Joseph Redbird case? Santos smiled slightly. We've been watching Cross Dynamics, and you ever since you hired that private investigator to look into the circumstances of Mr. Redbird's death. Elena looked at Daniel with something that might have been respect. You were investigating Joseph's death. I've been investigating it for years, Daniel admitted. I never believed he killed himself. Joseph wasn't the type to give up no matter how badly I'd hurt him. You were right, Santos said. According to the evidence, we've uncovered much of it from Robert Cross's own records. Joseph Redbird was murdered. Pushed from the Golden Gate Bridge by your brother, who needed to ensure that Joseph could never reclaim his stolen work. The revelation hit the room like a physical force. Robert had gone beyond theft and betrayal. He'd committed murder to protect Daniel's crime. I didn't know, Daniel whispered. Robert, I swear I didn't know. Of course you didn't, Robert snarled. You were too weak to do what needed to be done. I saved your career, your reputation, your entire life, and you never even thanked me. By killing an innocent man. By eliminating a threat to our family's success. The blast shutters retracted as FBI agents flooded the command center. Robert was taken into custody, still screaming about family loyalty and necessary sacrifices. As the chaos settled, Daniel found himself alone with Elena and Michael for the first time since learning the truth. So what happens now, he asked. Michael was back at his computer monitoring the Spirit AI deployment. Now the real work begins. Joseph's vision is alive, but it needs people to nurture it, guide it, make sure it serves the communities it was designed for. I'd like to help with that, Daniel said. If you'll have me. Elena studied his face. It won't be easy. There will be trials, investigations, media scrutiny. Your name will be connected to Robert's crimes. I know, and it won't be profitable. The Spirit AI is open source, no patents, no licensing fees, no corporate control. I know. You'll be starting over. From nothing. Daniel looked at his son, brilliant, principled, everything Daniel had never managed to be. Not from nothing, from something better than nothing. Michael looked up from his screen, and for the first time, Daniel saw acceptance in his eyes. Not forgiveness that would take time, but acceptance. There's something else, Elena said. Something I need to tell you before you decide to stay. What? She moved to a window overlooking the bay where the sun was setting in brilliant oranges and purples. Joseph didn't just develop AI algorithms. He developed a philosophy, a way of thinking about technology as medicine for broken communities. The Spirit AI isn't just a program, it's a healing process. I don't understand. You will, Michael said quietly, if you're willing to learn. As night fell over the island, Daniel realized that his old life, the life built on theft and lies, was truly over. But something new was beginning. something that might eventually be worthy of the man Joseph Redbird had believed Daniel could become. The tide was turning, and for the first time in 18 years, Daniel Cross was ready to swim in the right direction. 3 months later, Daniel sat in a federal courtroom in San Francisco, watching his brother receive a life sentence for the murder of Joseph Redbird. The evidence had been overwhelming: Robert's own digital records witness testimony from Michael, and DNA evidence that had been preserved from the original investigation. And Mr. Robert Cross, Judge Patricia Harrison said, her eyes carrying the weight of finality, "You have been found guilty of murder in the first degree, conspiracy to commit fraud and violation of tribal sovereignty. This court sentences you to life in prison without the possibility of parole." Daniel felt no satisfaction at the verdict, only a deep sadness for the brother he'd lost to greed and hatred years before Robert had ever killed anyone. As Robert was led away in shackles, he caught Daniel's eye one last time. "This should have been our empire, Danny," he said quietly. "We could have ruled the world." "We could have served it instead," Daniel replied. "That would have been enough." Outside the courthouse, Daniel was met by a crush of reporters. His own trial for corporate fraud and theft of intellectual property was scheduled to begin next month, but Agent Santos had indicated that his cooperation with the investigation would likely result in a plea deal and minimal prison time. "Mr. Cross," a reporter shouted, "do you have any comment on your brother's conviction?" "Justice was served," Daniel said simply. "Not just for Joseph Redbird, but for every person whose trust we violated in building Cross Dynamics." "What about your own charges? Will you plead guilty?" "Yes, I stole Joseph Redbird's work and built a company on that theft. I've spent the last 18 years trying to convince myself otherwise, but the truth is simple. I was a thief, and now I'm paying the price. What's next for you after your trial?" Daniel looked past the cameras to where Elena and Michael waited by a Cherokee Nation vehicle. They'd driven down from the island for the verdict, and they'd be driving him back afterward. "I'm going to spend whatever time I have left trying to build something worthy of the man I should have been 18 years ago." The reporters shouted follow-up questions, but Daniel walked away. He was done performing for cameras, done crafting narratives for public consumption. The only audience that mattered now was the family he'd finally found the courage to acknowledge. "How do you feel?" Elena asked as they drove north toward the bay. "Empty, but not in a bad way." Daniel watched the familiar scenery roll by, the same road he'd traveled thousands of times as a wealthy CEO, but everything looked different now. "Like I finally put down a weight I didn't realize I was carrying." "That's how Joseph felt when he first completed the Spirit AI prototype," Michael said from the back seat. "He said it was like his mind had been holding its breath for years and he could finally exhale." Over the past 3 months, Daniel had learned to treasure these small revelations about Joseph. Michael and Elena shared memories freely, now helping Daniel understand the man he'd betrayed, the friend he'd lost. They'd also helped him understand what he'd been trying to become. The Spirit AI project had grown beyond anything Joseph had originally envisioned and deployed across 57 tribal communities. It was preserving languages, documenting oral histories, and creating educational programs that respected indigenous ways of knowing. More importantly, it was healing. Elders who hadn't spoken their native languages in decades were rediscovering words they'd thought lost forever. Children separated from their cultural heritage by adoption or urban displacement were reconnecting with their roots. Communities that had been fractured by centuries of forced assimilation were finding new ways to come together. It was exactly what Joseph had dreamed of: technology as medicine code, as ceremony artificial intelligence, as a bridge between generations. And Daniel was learning to be part of it. "There's something I want to show you," Michael said as they reached the island. "Something I've been working on since Robert's arrest." He led them to a new section of the computer lab where a single workstation hummed quietly. On the screen was an interface unlike anything Daniel had ever seen. Not the cold corporate design of modern software, but something that felt organic, alive, respectful. "I've been developing a memorial protocol," Michael explained. "A way for the Spirit AI to preserve not just cultural knowledge, but personal memories. Stories, voices, even personality patterns." Daniel felt a chill. "You mean like digital resurrection?" "No, nothing that grandiose or disrespectful." Michael's fingers moved across the keyboard and the screen filled with what looked like a conversation interface. "I mean like digital remembrance. A way for people to interact with the memories and wisdom of those they've lost." A name appeared at the top of the interface, Joseph Redbird. Michael, Elena said softly. What have you done? I've been interviewing everyone who knew him, recording their stories, their memories of things he said, ways he thought about problems. I've fed all of it into a specialized version of the Spirit AI. Daniel stared at the screen. You're talking to your father. I'm talking to the memory of my father, the collective memory of everyone who loved him. Michael's voice was steady, but Daniel could hear the emotion underneath. Watch. He typed a question. What would you think about the Spirit AI project today? The response came quickly in text that somehow felt like Joseph's voice. I would be proud that it serves the people instead of profits. I would be amazed that it brings communities together instead of pulling them apart. I would be grateful that my death wasn't meaningless if it led to this healing. Daniel's throat tightened. How can you be sure that's really what he would have said? Because I know my father, Michael replied. And because the AI doesn't invent responses, it synthesizes them from real memories, real conversations, real personality patterns. It's not Joseph, but it's made from Joseph. Elena was crying silently, reading the words on the screen. Ask him about forgiveness, she whispered. Michael typed, what about forgiveness for those who wronged you? Forgiveness isn't about forgetting the harm or excusing the sin, came the response. It's about refusing to let someone else's weakness become your poison. I forgave Daniel Cross not because he deserved it, but because I deserved to be free from hatred. Jesus, Daniel breathed. That sounds exactly like him. There's more, Michael said. He opened another interface, this one labeled simply Danny. What is this? The AI's analysis of your relationship with Joseph based on everyone's memories, including yours, the stories you've told me and Mom over the past 3 months. Daniel hesitated, then leaned forward to read. Daniel Cross was Joseph Redbird's closest friend and greatest failure. Joseph loved Daniel's brilliance, but couldn't save him from his own ambition. The theft of the Spirit AI was as much Joseph's tragedy as Daniel's crime. Joseph failed to see how desperate Daniel had become, how afraid he was of not being enough. Joseph's last words about Daniel were, I should have helped him find another way. I should have seen that he was drowning. The words hit Daniel like a physical blow. After 18 years of carrying guilt, he'd never considered that Joseph might have carried guilt too, that his friend might have blamed himself for not preventing the betrayal. That can't be right, Daniel said. I stole from him. I destroyed his dreams. You did, Michael agreed, but you were also his friend. He loved you even after everything. That's what forgiveness means, loving someone despite their worst actions. Elena moved to stand beside Daniel, her hand on his shoulder. This is what I've been trying to tell you for months. Joseph didn't die hating you. He died wishing he could have saved you. Daniel sank into a chair, overwhelmed by the weight of grace he'd never imagined possible. What do I do with that knowledge? You honor it, Michael said simply. You become the person he believed you could be. Over the following weeks, as Daniel prepared for his own trial, he threw himself into the work of the Spirit AI project. Not as a CEO or visionary, but as a student learning from Michael and Elena how to build technology that served rather than exploited. He learned about traditional Cherokee decision-making processes, where the good of the 7th generation in the future was considered in every choice. He learned about the difference between data and wisdom, between information and understanding. Most importantly, he learned about himself. You're not the same person who stole from Joseph, Elena observed one evening as they watched the sunset from the island's shore. But you're not entirely different either. What do you mean? You still have the same brilliance, the same joy, the same ability to see possibilities others miss. But now you're using those gifts for healing instead of harm. Daniel picked up a smooth stone, turning it over in his palm. Do you think it's enough, this work, this attempt at redemption? I think it's a beginning. Will you ever be able to love me again? Really love me, not just accept me? Elena was quiet for a long time, watching the waves roll in with their eternal rhythm. I don't know. The love I felt for you 18 years ago was for someone I thought you were. The person I'm getting to know now is different. Better in some ways, but still carrying the weight of what you've done. And Michael. Michael is young. He has his whole life ahead of him, and he's choosing to include you in it. That's more grace than most people ever receive. Daniel's trial began on a cold November morning. Unlike Robert's case, there was no jury. Daniel had pled guilty to all charges in exchange for the prosecution's recommendation of minimum sentencing. Judge Patricia Harrison, the same judge who had sentenced Robert, reviewed the case file with careful attention. Mr. Cross, she said, you've admitted to theft of intellectual property valued at approximately $12 billion. You've acknowledged that your actions led directly to the suicide we now know it was murder of Joseph Redbird. Under normal circumstances, these crimes would result in significant prison time. Daniel stood at attention, prepared for whatever judgment came. However, Judge Harrison continued, the court has received unusual testimony on your behalf. Not just character references, but evidence of genuine transformation. The Cherokee Nation has formally requested that you be sentenced to community service rather than incarceration, specifically to continue your work on the Spirit AI project. Daniel felt his knees nearly buckle. He hadn't expected this. More importantly, the testimony of Michael Redbird carries special weight with this court. A young man who had every reason to seek vengeance has instead asked for mercy. That speaks to both his character and to whatever redemption you may have achieved. Judge Harrison paused, looking directly at Daniel. The court sentences you to 10 years of supervised community service to be served working with indigenous communities on technology preservation projects. You will also forfeit any remaining assets from Cross Dynamics and submit to quarterly psychological evaluations. Thank you, Your Honor, Daniel managed. Don't thank me, Mr. Cross. Thank the people who saw something in you worth saving. As Daniel left the courthouse, a free man, he found Michael and Elena waiting by the courthouse steps. 10 years, Michael said. That's enough time to really build something lasting. What did you tell the judge? Daniel asked. In your testimony. Michael smiled, the same brilliant, transformative smile that had once lit up Joseph's face. I told her the truth, that you're not the man who stole from my father. You're not the man who let greed eclipse friendship. You're my dim, and you're learning to be worthy of that title. The words hit Daniel harder than any prison sentence could have. Not forgiveness, not yet, but something even more precious, hope. Epilogue. 5 years later, the Cherokee Nation's annual Technology and Cultural Preservation Conference was held in a new facility on Alcatraz Island, now officially renamed Redbird Island in Joseph's honor. Representatives from indigenous communities across North and South America had gathered to share innovations, preserve traditions, and plan for the future. Daniel stood at the back of the main auditorium, watching Michael deliver the keynote address. At 22, his son had become one of the world's leading experts on culturally responsive artificial intelligence. He spoke with Joseph's passion, but with a wisdom that was entirely his own. Technology, Michael was saying to the packed audience, is not neutral. It carries the values, assumptions, and biases of its creators. If we want technology that serves our communities, we must be the ones to build it. The audience, tribal elders, young programmers, academics, activists, listened with rapt attention. The Spirit AI project had inspired similar efforts around the world, creating a new paradigm for how artificial intelligence could respect and preserve cultural diversity rather than erasing it. My father, Joseph Redbird, dreamed of AI that could heal instead of harm, Michael continued. Today, that dream is reality in over 200 communities worldwide. But this is just the beginning. Daniel felt a hand on his shoulder and turned to find Elena beside him. They'd married 2 years ago in a traditional Cherokee ceremony, a quiet affair with just Michael and a few close friends in attendance. It had taken 5 years for them to find their way back to love, but the journey had been worth it. He's magnificent, Elena whispered. He's his father's son, Daniel replied. Both of his fathers. It had taken years for Daniel to understand that Michael's parentage was complex biological DNA, from Daniel's spiritual legacy, from Joseph, cultural grounding, from Elena in the Cherokee community. Michael belonged to all of them, and to none of them which had given him the freedom to become entirely himself. After the conference, the three of them walked to the memorial garden that had been built where the old prison yard used to be. At its center stood a simple granite stone inscribed with Joseph's words, "Technology is ceremony, code is prayer. Innovation is how we honor the seventh generation." I have news, Michael said as they stood before the memorial. MIT has offered me a full professorship. They want me to establish a new department, Indigenous Technology Studies. That's wonderful, Elena said. You'll accept only if you both come with me. Boston has a significant Native American community, and they've been asking for help with their own cultural preservation projects. Daniel looked at his son, then at his wife, then at the memorial to the friend whose death had made possible everything good in his current life. "I think Joseph would approve," he said finally. "I know he would," Michael replied. "I asked him." Daniel smiled understanding. Michael still consulted the AI memorial version of Joseph regularly, not as a replacement for his father, but as a connection to his wisdom. It was a form of prayer Daniel had come to understand, a way of keeping love alive across the boundary of death. As they walked back toward the main building, Daniel reflected on the strange path that had brought him here. 5 years ago, he'd been a billionaire CEO with everything money could buy and nothing that mattered. Today, he was a convicted felon working for modest wages on projects that would never make him rich. He'd never been happier. "There's something else," Elena said as they reached the boat that would take them back to the mainland. "Something I've been waiting for the right moment to tell you." She took Daniel's hand. Retry JN, continue edit. She took Daniel's hand and placed it on her stomach. "I'm pregnant." Daniel felt the world stop around him. "Are you serious?" 12 weeks. The doctor confirmed it yesterday. Elena's smile was radiant. "Michael's going to have a little brother or sister." Michael whooped with joy, spinning around the dock like the young man he still was, despite his serious demeanor. "I'm going to be the best big brother ever. I'll teach them programming and Cherokee history and how to make mom's famous fry bread." Daniel stared at Elena, overwhelmed by emotions he couldn't name. "But we're in our 40s. The risks are manageable," Elena said firmly. "I've already spoken with specialists. This baby is wanted, planned for, and already loved." As they boarded the boat for the mainland, Daniel felt something shift inside him, a sense of completion he'd never experienced before. His first time as a father, he'd been absent, consumed by guilt and ambition. This time would be different. "What will we name them?" he asked as San Francisco's skyline came into view. "If it's a boy, Elena said, "I'd like to call him Joseph Daniel Redbird Cross." "And if it's a girl, Hope," Michael said without hesitation, "because that's what this family is built on now." Daniel looked back at the island one last time, where Joseph's memorial stood surrounded by the flowering gardens that had replaced the prison walls. The late afternoon sun caught the granite marker, making it gleam like a beacon. Technology is ceremony. Code is prayer. Innovation is how we honor the seventh generation. For the first time in 23 years, Daniel Cross believed he was finally living up to those words. As the boat carried them toward their future, Elena leaned against his shoulder, and Michael pulled out his laptop to continue working on the next generation of spirit AI technology that would serve their children and their children's children. The tide had broken years ago, washing away everything false in Daniel's life. What remained was smaller, simpler, but infinitely more precious love earned through service, redemption built day by day, and the chance to be the father and husband and man he'd always been capable of becoming. Behind them, the sun set over Redbird Island, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. Ahead of them lay Boston, new work, new challenges, and the promise of new life. The ghost of Silicon Valley had finally found his way home. The end. Author's note. This story is dedicated to all those who believe that technology should serve humanity's highest aspirations, not its basest impulses. May we always remember that innovation without wisdom is mere cleverness, and that the true measure of progress is how it lifts up the most vulnerable among us. The Cherokee Nation's work in digital sovereignty and cultural preservation is real and ongoing. While this story is fiction, the challenges and opportunities it depicts reflect genuine struggles happening in indigenous communities worldwide. Sometimes the greatest courage isn't in building an empire, it's in tearing down the walls that empire was built on and starting over with better foundations. In memory of all the Joseph Redbirds whose dreams were stolen, and in hope for all the Michael Redbirds who will build something better from the ashes.